Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. We're going to take the complex, super high-stakes pathophysiology of infective endocarditis and basically turn it into a medical mystery, one that you can easily decode for the NCLEX and your future clinical practice. I'm really pumped to walk you through this because, honestly, there's nothing quite like the satisfaction of piecing together those tiny clinical clues to actually save a patient's life. So, grab your mental magnifying glass and let's jump right in.
Okay, let's start with a classic presentation that should instantly trigger your clinical detective instincts. Imagine you walk into your patient's room. They've got a fever, maybe some chills, and when you place your stethoscope on their chest, you hear it. A completely new or significantly changed heart murmur. Boom! This is your immediate red flag. You absolutely must suspect endocarditis until proven otherwise.
Here's the kicker. This disease carries a ticking clock of deadly complications. It's so important to understand that infective endocarditis isn't just a localized heart problem, It's a profound systemic infection. It brings life-threatening embolic, cardiac, and septic threats right to your patient's doorstep. It requires immediate, precise nursing action. As we'll see in a minute, you can never, ever treat this as a low-acuity diagnosis.
To fight our enemy, we've got to understand the culprit. Infective endocarditis is a microbial infection of the heart's endocardial surface. But the real villains here? Those are the vegetations. Think of a vegetation as a friable, totally unstable mass made up of fibrin, platelets, inflammatory cells, and bacteria. They physically latch on to the valve leaflets. They destroy the valve tissue, block blood flow, and worst of all, they can easily break off as deadly emboli.
Let's move into Section 1, the heart under attack. We need to understand how these lethal vegetations manage to form in the first place. Think of it as a chain reaction. First, we have endothelial damage, maybe from turbulent blood flow or an IV catheter. This exposes collagen, which makes platelets clump together and form a sterile thrombus. Then, bacteremia occurs. Bacteria from, say, routine dental procedure or an IV line enter the blood. They find that sticky little thrombus and they colonize it. The vegetation grows, and that leads directly to valve destruction and eventually fragments breaking off.
Now, it's pretty wild how we can separate our microscopic suspects into two totally distinct profiles. On one side, we've got acute endocarditis. The usual suspect here is Staphylococcus aureus. It's rapid, severe, highly virulent, and aggressive enough to attack completely normal heart valves. On the flip side is subacute endocarditis, often caused by viridin streptococci from normal dental flora. This one is a slow, sneaky process taking weeks to months, and it generally needs an already damaged or abnormal valve to actually take hold.
We also have to track the trajectory of those emboli based on which side of the heart is infected. If the vegetation is on the left side, on the mitral or aortic valves, those fragments act like systemic shrapnel. They shoot out to the brain, the kidneys, the spleen. But if it's on the right side, typically the tricuspid valve, which is the #1 spot for patients with a history of IV drug use, those fragments travel straight to the lungs, showering them with septic pulmonary emboli.
All right, Section 2, spotting the clinical clues. As this disease progresses outward from the heart, you act as the detective, spotting the physical clues left behind. And these are some of the absolute highest yield signs you will ever see. To make them stick, just remember the golden rule. Osler equals ouch. Osler nodes are painful, tender nodules right on the pads of the fingers and toes, driven by immune complex deposition. Janway lesions, though, those are simply painless, flat hemorrhagic spots on the palms and soles, caused by septic microemboli. Painful pads, Osler. Painless palms, Janway. Let's flesh out the rest of this clinical picture. Look at how immune complexes and microemboli trigger a whole cascade of specific visual clues. You've got Roth spots, which are retinal hemorrhages with a little pale center that pop up on a fundoscopic exam. You've got splinter hemorrhages, those dark red linear streaks right under the fingernails. And don't forget petechia hiding out on the conjunctiva or oral mucosa. Your thorough physical assessment is exactly what uncovers these tiny but absolutely critical red flags. Once we spot the physical clues, we need hard evidence. Let's look at Section 3, Diagnostic Detective Work.
This brings us to the highest yield priority of this entire explainer. Burn this rule into your memory. This is the single most important action in infective endocarditis. If a provider orders antibiotics for suspected endocarditis, you must draw 2 sets of blood cultures from 2 different sites before you ever hang that IV bag. Start antibiotics before drawing those cultures, you've just destroyed your clinical evidence. You lose the ability to identify the exact organism, and you literally risk the patient's life by flying blind.
And listen, the integrity of your evidence matters just as much as getting it on time. Drawing those cultures from a dedicated antibiotic PICC line or central line will totally ruin your culture results. Always use peripheral venipuncture to make sure you're getting a true, accurate picture of what's circulating in that patient's bloodstream.
So how do we organize all this evidence? We use the modified Duke criteria. To nail down a definite diagnosis, securing two major findings is your most direct path. Those two major criteria are the positive blood cultures we just talked about and a positive echocardiogram showing a vegetation, an abscess, or new regurgitation. The minor criteria, things like a fever, IV drug use, or those Janeway lesions, they help build the case. But the cultures and the echo, those are your smoking guns.
Speaking of the echocardiogram, we have two different tools for looking at the heart. A standard transthoracic echo, or TTE, is a solid, non-invasive first step, but its sensitivity is only sitting around 40 to 60%. The transesophageal echo, the TEE, now that is our gold standard magnifying glass. With a massive 90 to 95% sensitivity, it gets right up behind the heart to clearly visualize those tiny, hidden vegetations, abscesses, and complications on prosthetic valves.
With the diagnosis confirmed, we enter Section 4, Treatment and Nursing Priorities.
This is the final, high-stakes phase. The big takeaway here is that oral antibiotics simply won't cut it. The bacteria are literally hiding inside a protective shield of clot and fibrin, right on the valve. Bacteriostatic drugs are useless here. We need bactericidal, bacteria-killing antibiotics. And because of that shield, the patient has to commit to a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks of continuous intravenous therapy just to make sure every last bacterium is gone.
As you're giving these heavy-hitter drugs over those long weeks, you've got to watch their toxicities like a hawk. Look at vancomycin. Infuse it too fast and you trigger red man syndrome. It's not a true allergy, you just need to slow the rate. Gentamicin, it's both nephrotoxic and ototoxic, so you're checking for ringing in the ears or hearing loss at every single assessment. Daptomycin, avoid it entirely in left-sided endocarditis because it gets inactivated by pulmonary surfactant. And ceftriaxone is fantastic for once-daily outpatient IV therapy.
Since infective endocarditis is never low acuity, you are the early warning system. You've got to constantly hunt for catastrophic complications. If you see a simple PR prolongation or a new heart block on an ECG, that can mean a perivalvular abscess is extending into the conduction system. That's a surgical emergency. Sudden facial droop, that's a cerebral emboli. Activate the stroke team right now. Sudden severe left upper quadrant pain, suspect a splenic infarct. You are the safety net.
Let's bring it all home with Section 5, Top NCLEX Lifesavers.
Let's rapid fire through these 10 absolutely critical facts. Fever plus a new murmur, suspect IE immediately. Never forget that pulling 2 sets of blood cultures must precede your antibiotics. Think Osler Ouch for painful finger pads and painless palms for Janeway. Map the emboli, right-sided hits the lungs, left-sided hits the body. Watch that ECG for PR prolongation, it signals an abscess. Commit to 4 to 6 weeks of IV bactericidal meds. Remember, daptomycin is useless in the lungs, vancomycin needs a slow drip, and gentamicin attacks the kidneys and the ears.
I want to leave you with this final, critical thought as we wrap up. For a patient with the history of endocarditis, surviving the hospital stay, that's just the beginning. Without lifelong prophylactic dental care, pristine IV catheter care, and really vigilant symptom monitoring, that culprit could return at any time. It's your education that empowers them to protect their heart for the rest of their lives. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and stay curious.